all you need this morning. Black coffee and the Ken and Barkley Company on 790 KABC Talk Radio. It is 7:16 on KABC Talk Radio. You know, it occurs to me that one of the best arguments maybe against having cameras in the courtroom is what has happened in the second Menendez trial without them. It has gone along the case. We haven't argued about it. We're letting justice take its course, and there have not been those cameras. As a matter of fact, prosecution has already rested, and I believe the defense starts today.
Yes, it does. As a matter of fact, that was well, we had heard earlier in the morning that what's her name, the defense attorney,
Leslie Abramson,
will begin her her defense today. We have a letter here that came from Hazel Thornton, and we have Hazel on the line. So her letter paid off because she's written a book, Hung Jury: The Diary of a Menendez Juror.
You were then on the first Menendez case, right?
Yes, I was. Good morning, Ken and Roger.
Hi. She says, I heard you talking yesterday about how no one is interested in the Menendez retrial. Face it, she says, sequels are never any good. However, I think cameras not being allowed in the courtroom has a lot to do with it. As Ken was indicating, he feels the same way. So it'll be interesting to find out from Hazel how come these two guys ended up with a hung jury when we know that they blew their parents away.
Is it my turn?
Yeah. That's the big question.
Well, one of the most popular media myths is that half the jury wanted to acquit Eric. I was on Eric's jury.
That the women were in love with...
That the women were in love with Eric, and they were confused and gullible and didn't understand. And what the public doesn't realize, and I think that one of the reasons it would be nice if more people went on jury duty and just didn't throw their summonses in the trash, is that they didn't know what the legal definition was of first-degree murder versus second-degree versus voluntary manslaughter versus involuntary manslaughter. So it wasn't a case of people not being able to decide or wanting to acquit. It was a disagreement between the level of guilt. And in this particular case, basically the men believed the prosecution case and felt that the facts fit the legal definition of first-degree murder. And basically the women believed the Menendez story and felt that the facts of the case fit voluntary manslaughter.
Now, would the women, I remember us discussing this at the time, that a second-degree conviction might have, under these circumstances, given, if we recall, that no one spoke to contradict their stories about the father. Right? I mean, the father never... You'd think someone would step up and say, well, hey, wait a minute, he is not this ogre they're painting him out to be. He did, apparently, most people, including his own mother.
Exactly. And many family members testified on behalf of the brothers, and that was one of the things that made their story believable.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, you didn't want to acquit them.
No.
Nor did any of...
They absolutely are guilty. They absolutely blew their parents away. They absolutely should be convicted and punished. The question is, what is the correct level of legal guilt? And we could not agree to that no matter how long we talked about it.
Is that the judge's fault that the jury went in to deliberate and not understanding what they needed to know?
I don't even think it's a matter of not understanding. Actually, I think...
Disagreeing.
That it wasn't... Yeah, it was a matter of disagreeing. I think in this case, of course, I think I was right and they were wrong.
What level of guilt were you in favor of?
I was in favor of voluntary manslaughter, which means that I do believe that the likelihood is that they killed out of fear, but I also believe that when they went into the room with shotguns blazing, there was an intent to kill, which makes it a more severe crime than involuntary.
Would you have compromised with the men on a second degree?
No, because second degree involves some, not premeditation, but I can't remember the term now. It's the fact that I believe that it was the killings were committed out of fear that automatically makes it manslaughter and legally does not make it murder of any type.
Did second degree come up? I mean, did you discuss it?
There was a little bit of jockeying around. Okay, we'll come down to second degree if you'll come up to second degree. But only about 3 people on the whole 12-person jury were willing to compromise like that.
Didn't the fact that they got hold of the money and went out and started buying things and spending lavishly have some impact on you, thinking that fear had nothing to do with it? It was just plain and simple greed. They wanted the money.
Actually, no, because as for their spending money after the crime, their parents were millionaires. They never had a problem with money. They were always given as much money as they could possibly want. And you have to remember that I was on Eric's jury, and that most of the evidence about post-crime spending pertained to Lyle.
All right, what about the mother?
the argument was
just as bad as the father.
She was?
According to the testimony.
In what way?
In what way? She, well, first of all, she was psychotic. She had a drug and alcohol problem, and she was mentally and physically abusive, and she also supported their father in his every little whim. So they had every bit as much reason to be afraid of her as they did of him. And that is one of the most controversial parts of the whole trial.
They were afraid of her doing physical harm to them?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, in the most recent trial, what is it? There's been another argument that has been put forth, and that is that, what was it? Can you bring, just a week or two ago, something we didn't hear in the first trial, we did in the second, and that was, my mind is failing. I'm not helping you either.
There are actually several differences between the first trial and the second trial.
Okay.
I'm not sure what you're thinking of, but one of them is, well, first of all, the prosecution is prepared this time. I think they totally underestimated the defense last time, so they'll probably have some rebuttal expert witnesses, whereas they didn't last time, for example. And they, another big difference is that there's only one jury this time, which is not good for Eric because there's a perceived possible difference in the level of guilt between Eric and Lyle. And another difference is that the psychologist that they confessed to last time is not the star witness this time.
Not the star witness. He's coming. He's going to be testifying, isn't he?
I heard that he wasn't, and if he is, he's at least not going to be their star witness and have the whole trial center around him.
Did Leslie Abramson impress you? Was it her ability as a defense attorney?
Well, her ability as a defense attorney certainly had a lot to do with it, but it also, the reason I voted for voluntary manslaughter also had a lot to do with how credible I found the Menendez brothers and their supporting witnesses and their stories. You know, did it sound plausible? Did their stories hang together? And there were 5 months of testimony for me to have a good long chance to see who I believed and who I didn't.
Now, since the trial, we have heard of some of the manipulations of Lyle, I guess.
See, that's the whole point. You hear every day, Lyle did this, Lyle did that. You know, Lyle asked somebody to lie. In fact, yesterday in the paper there was a little snippet that said "bad boy," and he's stockpiling jumpsuits and blankets, and I don't know what he's always getting in trouble.
So do you?
Again, I was on Eric's jury, and I can't really vouch for Lyle.
Well, would you have now that you've become a consumer of information like the rest of us? Would you say that you think Lyle should go away, maybe on a second degree or first degree murder, and Eric should not?
Well, I would have to hear all the evidence against Lyle. I think it's as likely that they both killed out of fear, thereby reducing it from murder to manslaughter, but that Lyle does a lot of stupid things and gets himself into constant trouble. I mean, I think he's a troublemaker, but I'd have to hear all the evidence against him to be able to say if he was a...
Well, I mean, if you kill out of... Let's assume that, let's say they were afraid, but, I mean, was it justified? Just because you're afraid and you have some sort of vision that your parents are going to bump you off, you can go in there and blow them away and reload?
It's not if you think they're going to at some point and you're taking the law into your own hands and trying to prevent it. It's if you think they are at that moment. It's called an unreasonable but honest perception that your life is in danger.
What made you believe that at that moment they thought their lives were in danger?
Well, the reason they gave, it had to do with an escalation of events over the previous week and the way their parents were acting and certain things that their parents said and did. And the way they told the story, and from what we learned of the family history, and the fact that they were cross-examined, day after day after day, and that their story made sense. Put it this way, their story made as much sense as the prosecution's story did, which is more than raising, it's not just a slight reasonable doubt. I'd give them a 50-50 weighting as to credibility.
How old were these guys when they did this?
18 and 21. They were adults.
Yeah, old enough if they felt threatened to just get the heck out of there.
Well, and I agree with you that any normal person would have and should have, and in which case, you couldn't give them this unreasonable fear thing because they would be a reasonable person. But what we learned during the trial was a good deal about the psychology of abuse, and there are lots. It's hard for people who haven't been abused to understand. And I can't personally relate to it, but I did learn a lot about the reasons why people don't just leave. And of course it would be better if they had just left.
Are you ready for a Minyard Predicts?
Sure.
Minyard predicts that the new trial will produce a verdict of second-degree murder.
Really?
I think that's a pretty good prediction.
Thank you.
What I predict is...
I'm going to hit one of these days.
What I predict is that whatever they get sentenced with, I predict a verdict, definitely. And whatever they get sentenced with, of course, they get double time for all these 6 years they've been in jail so far. So it's going to probably look like they walked away with it, even when they finally get convicted.
Well, this is Hazel Thornton, listener of the Ken and Barkley Company, and now author of the book Hung Jury, The Diary of a Menendez Juror. It sounds like it would be interesting reading, Hazel.
Well, it's also, it's been published by Temple University Press, which makes it a different type of book than one of the... For one thing, I wrote it myself.
Yeah.
And it's accompanied by a psychological commentary and a legal commentary.
Oh, so, okay.
And it's available in local bookstores, but I don't know quite how widely. Can I give the 800 number for Temple University Press?
Why not? Sure.
It's 1-800-447-1656.
447-1656, an 800 number, and we will pass that along to Lita. I'm doing that right now, Lita. There it is. Thank you for talking with us, Hazel.
Thanks for having me on.
Nice to know that you're a listener out there.
Great show.
Thank you.
Bye. 828 on KABC Talk Radio, Sports, and Eric coming up.
Don't you hate...